Hello, my dears, and welcome to another episode of Keeping Kith, a podcast about radical neighboring that includes not just our human neighbors, but all the many budding beings that surround us. Every week, I sort of try to find a different neighbor to keep Kith with. So if you've been following along, you know I move around a little bit. I live here in western South Dakota, on the short grass prairie. So most of my neighbors are not human. We have a lot more non-human neighbors than human neighbors in this part of the world. If you've been following along, you also know that it seems like every single week I say, oh, this week I was going to come out to be with the horses, or I was going to come out to be with the cottonwood trees, and but it's so windy, I'm scared you won't be able to hear me. That is true once again. I also usually keep my face off camera for those that are watching instead of listening, because I kind of want it to be more about the neighbors other than me. But today I am including myself a little bit for if you're watching. Not just listening, simply because, again, it's so windy that I'm scared if I put the camera too far away, you won't be able to hear me at all. And you still might not be able to because it is windy again. But part of the reason I decided to stick with the wind, sometimes I've stayed recording from inside a building with the door open, or inside my car with the window down. But today I just thought, it is very windy in western South Dakota, but it does seem a bit extraordinary that the wind is always winding when I come out to record. So I figured the wind is feeling like it needs to have its time to be heard. So who knows, maybe if I give the wind a chance to have its episode, then maybe it will let me make space for some of the other neighbors. So originally I'd come out though to share Keeping Kith with this Ponderosa Pine. And the fun thing about the wind being windy today, while we're underneath this Ponderosa Pine, is that the sound that a Ponderosa Pine makes is distinct from any other kind of tree when the wind is blowing through it. So I'm not sure if that's going to come through in the recording, or if it's going to you're just going to hear the harsh wind sound against the microphone. But if it is indeed coming through, it's a few weeks ago I was out with the cottonwood trees, and I was talking about that cottonwoods also make a very distinctive sound when they are fully leafed out, and it's like a very particular kind of hush 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 sound that's somewhat related. They also look very different when their leaves shake, because the stem of a cottonwood leaf is rectangularly shaped. So it kind of catches differently with the wind, I guess. And not surprisingly, Ponderosa pines also have a very distinct sound, because they are pine trees, so they have needles, not leaves. And or I don't know, are needles leaves? Is that categorically the same thing? But they also are very long needles, which, again, if you're watching, maybe you can see that. But yes, they are very long needles, and consequently, see right now you can really hear it, or I can really hear it. It makes such a beautiful sound that is like the slow rushing. It has the wind through Ponderosa pines, to me, is much less urgent than sometimes when the wind really gets going through other trees and it's whipping around. You can just hear how fast it's moving. And somehow the wind moving through Ponderosa pine trees always sounds like the most ancient wind. And there's something in it that reminds me, I don't know if it reminds me to slow down, but it just reminds me of geological time, which is that our lives as humans might seem short, but time itself is long. And the other thing that's wonderful about Ponderosa pines is they smell really good. And again, I think they have kind of their own unique smell. And if you've ever been to the Black Hills of South Dakota, we have a lot of Ponderosa pines there. And presumably the Black Hills in the other states as well, or in Wyoming, also have that smell. But it always, when I sort of step out, if we've driven from our ranch down to the Black Hills, and when I first step out and I smell that smell, it's always just such a welcome thing. So we don't have a whole lot of Ponderosa pines up here on the plains, but we do have some, including this one. And I've read a bit about them. I don't know as much about them as I know about cottonwoods. But whereas cottonwood trees tend to be where it is wet, they do need moisture. And in fact, that's kind of, sometimes you can tell what's happening, like where a floodplain might be, or where maybe there's underwater or underground water. You can tell that by where a stand of cottonwood trees will spring up, because they really do. They need to have water in order to grow. Ponderosa pines do not. You will see them in the Black Hills just kind of growing on rocks. It's pretty pretty impressive what they can take, where they can take root, and how they can sort of remain rooted despite circumstances that, not many other trees might be able to handle. And it's funny, as I'm saying all this and listening to the wind going through the pine needles, and I'm just thinking, I wonder if that their needles don't serve as some kind of buffer, so that maybe it's almost like they're softening the wind as it's hitting them, and that is how they're able to not just topple over when the wind comes up. I mean, they do topple over sometimes, but so do we've gotten 100 mile an hour straight line winds, and it's not normal, but it's not extraordinary to get those here. So obviously that's going to be pretty hard for a tree. But yeah, maybe those pine needles help. And perhaps that's why when I hear it, that sound, it kind of reassures me. I don't know. Plus they have really big and fun pine cones. I feel like they're the kind of pine cones that when you're a city kid, you end up doing your preschool and kindergarten. These are the kind of pine cones that you end up crafting with. I don't know why I think that, but I feel like I remember making turkeys, adding turkey feathers to pine cones for crafting sessions. And so these pine cones, the Ponderosa pine cones, always seem sort of extra fun. So meanwhile, we've been having very warm weather, continuing to have unseasonably warm weather, and things are happening earlier than they would normally. We've got the lilacs are starting to bud out, and at this time of year we wouldn't be at all surprised normally to have snow, and the tulips in my yard are starting to come up, and I mean there is something a bit unsettling about it. I've been trying to just embrace the fact that spring is spring, and when it arrives it's still time for rejoicing, but it's definitely a little more challenging when it's coming in this warm, this early. And I've lived now through several summers of deep drought, which again is not uncommon in this part of the world, but it's still hard when it happens. Hard on everyone, hard on the humans, hard on the animals, hard on the grass. So it's certainly not something to look forward to, and often early warmth, that kind of weather like this it is a little unsettling. And the rest of the world, things feel unsettled in the rest of the world as well. I mean, weather, politics, all of it. Which is why this is an excellent, by keeping Kith with trees feels like a really excellent practice that I fully encourage you to try out. Because it really is true that trees have a different way of being in the world than humans. The folk opera that I was working on, or that we were performing last summer and we were touring with, called The Grass Widow, one of the narrator and one of the main characters of the play is a cottonwood tree. And that's one of the things she talks about, just how it's different for trees because they can't leave where they are. And if you imagine that kind of rootedness and how it might change your sensibilities and the way you interacted, the stories you told yourself. I don't know. Obviously, that was what I was thinking about when I wrote it. What would that be like? And for some reason, I found that idea reassuring. Which I guess I could say more about, but I don't think I will. Now, meanwhile, this past week marked the first interview. I conducted my very first interview for a podcast that will be coming out in June. And I bring it up because, so this is called Keeping Kith, and this practice of keeping Kith has been very informal and really is me just taking my phone out, wandering out somewhere and chatting at you. But in some ways it was a little bit, doing this was practice for me because I had a bigger idea that was more formal, that was going to take a lot more planning and organization and production. But this was kind of the entry point, and I wanted to try this out before I started the other project. But the other project will be coming out in June. It will also be called Keeping Kith. It will be a 5-episode arc. And I am getting to talk to all kinds of people people I know well and adore, people I don't know at all, but whose work I admire, people who have been recommended to me. And all with this theme of keeping Kith. What does it mean to sort of reimagine our idea of neighboring, to extend to our more than human neighbors? And how do our faith traditions and spiritual beliefs, how can they intersect with our land use and our agricultural practices? So that, I got to do the very first interview this week, and more to come. And I already am even more excited about the project. I was speaking with a professor at Wartburg Seminary in Decorah, Iowa. And he said a lot of things that were so cool, but the biggest one is that he teaches a class on eco-justice. And he said in this moment, it is hard not to, when you enter into a class about eco-justice, or the introduction for that class, there's so much anxiety and despair. You can imagine people signing up for a class about eco-justice. Most of those people are coming with a feeling of anxiety and despair into that classroom. And he said, so he instead starts with the idea of eco-wonder. And that's the entry point for the conversation. And I was teasing, but not teasing, that, I think that this is how I should start all the rest of the interviews, is it's asking people, what are the eco wonders where they live? And so yes, I think that's it. I will leave you with this week. If you feel so moved to go out, you can keep Kith with a tree in your neighborhood. Find a tree to sit under. But also to think about the eco wonders where you live, especially if you are feeling anxiety or despair. And when you think about those eco wonders, then maybe think about how you can go out and just feel the joy of the place you live. And let yourself rest in that. So until next time, I hope you all are able to keep Kith with whomever comes across your path or whomever you seek out. And I wish you all well.